This City Council meeting is called to order. We will begin with a moment for prayer or reflection. Thank you. I did it backwards. I will now read the land acknowledgement. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. Item 5, adoption of previous council meeting minutes. Regular meeting of City Council dated September 5th, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions there that anyone would like to point out? Okay, seeing none, we will adopt the minutes as presented for the corporate record. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Are there any amendments?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I move that council amends the order of the agenda to hear item 10, public hearing, immediately following item 7, which is council announcements.
Can I get a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay, we'll vote on the motion to amend the agenda. And that's passed. Councillor Sharps?
Yes, if I could also note that I have a notice of motion to be added to the agenda for number 13. For next week, yeah.
Okay. So the motion will be added next week?
It'll be added this week for reading next week.
Do we have a copy of the motion? If it's a notice of motion, we have to have a...
I can email it to you. I think I just missed getting it in on time.
So do we have to amend the agenda since it's not included?
Not necessarily, Mayor Clark. The way it was presented there, we can just note that when we get to section 13, that Councillor Sharps will give notice that at next week's council meeting, she intends to make a motion, and she will essentially state what that motion is at that time.
Thank you. So any other amendments? Seeing none, we will vote on, or the agenda is adopted as amended for the corporate record. Councillor announcements. Any councillor announcements? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and through the chair, I just wanted to thank all of those involved in the Art in Motion event that took place this past weekend. All of the staff who worked so hard to present it. I was there with my children. They really enjoyed themselves. All of the performers, there's kids that they knew well who were performing, and then they wanted to stay when they saw some of the costumes of the others. So it ended up being a really charming, delightful day. And I went inside to the Esplanade to see what was going on in there. And there was art everywhere for kids to enjoy, and I don't know how many dozens of children I saw getting, like, doing art and having the artists explain their techniques to them, and so it was a really great event, a wonderful performance. So for all the staff, all the volunteers, all the participants, and all the people who came out downtown, thank you so much. It was really a tremendous day.
I also have one. It's an apology or a correction. I believe in a chat news at noon interview, I stated that the electricity rates, the amendment to our bylaw on the electricity rates based on best of market would be coming to this council meeting. That was inaccurate as shown in the minutes from our last meeting, that will be coming forward the first council meeting in October 2023. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Seeing no further council and now, oh, go ahead.
I didn't want to do them both at once, so I want to see if someone else might have wanted to say we had an opportunity to have a meeting with Minister Scow today, the Minister of Tourism and Sport, and we had a great conversation about Medicine Hat, and he was very enthusiastic. So it was lovely to chat with him and get the opportunity to do that. And we certainly talked about tourism, Medicine Hat, and the impact they've had. It is a destination marketing organization, so I just wanted to say that we had done that for the councillors who weren't at the meeting, just so you know what we were doing, was talking to Minister Scow about opportunities in Medicine Hat, if there's more chance to talk to him. Our MLA, Justin Wright, was also at the meeting, and so it was great to be able to spend more time talking to him about what we all think is important to Medicine Hat. So any questions about it, I'm sure we'd be happy to answer them, but there'll be more opportunities as well.
And just Councillor Hyder and I were also at that meeting. Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so we now will move to the public hearing as it was moved up in the agenda.
So, Your Worship, at this time, I move that council approves development permit PLDP 20230577. Okay. Okay. Oh, that has to be on the floor. Don't you have to put it on the floor?
Oh, go ahead.
So, Your Worship, thanks. I move that council approves development permit PLDP 20230577, an application for self-storage at 1222 Allowance Avenue Southeast, subject to the conditions as presented, so it's on the floor. Thanks.
I'll second that.
Okay, so I will now open the public hearing. And the first part of the public hearing under the new procedure bylaw is to have administration introduce the resolution. So, yes, welcome, Manager Sissons.
My name is Robert Sissons, Manager of Planning, and I'm here to present PLDP 2023-0577, which is a development permit application for a change of use to a self-storage facility at 1222 Allowance Avenue. So I've just included a brief overview of the presentation. So we'll talk about site location. Sorry, just through your worship, the screen up there is not showing anything.
Thank you for letting me know. I will let Ron. There appears to be a blank screen on the top screen.
There it is. We're good.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I'll just go through the site location, development permit details, policy context, photos, and then provide administration's recommendation. So the subject site of this development permit application is highlighted on the image and is commonly referred to as the ADM mill site. The site's located at the curve of Allowance Avenue in the South Flats neighborhood and is accessed from Allowance Avenue through Tractor Avenue. So the site is approximately 16 acres in area. And then just to put that in perspective, that's about 5 times the size of the old Arena Lands site. So the application is for a change of use to a temporary self-storage with restrictions of only RV storage happening on site. The site is zoned direct control, giving council discretion over the use and development of the site and the ability to approve or refuse this development permit application. Previous use of the site was an industrial operation, so a flour mill, and it was owned and operated by the ADM Agri-Industry Company since about 1992. Original development of the site occurred in 1912 as the Ogilvy Flour Mills. The use of the flour mill was discontinued and decommissioning of the mill began around in 2013, and the site has been vacant over the past decade and is now under new ownership. The site is identified on the city's place of interest list, or also known as the POIL list, but there is no historical designation given to the site. So there are known constraints for the redevelopment of the site, such as flood risk, some abandoned gas wells, rail spurs, potential environmental contamination, and the conditions of the existing buildings. So these constraints were determined during initial review of the conceptualized redevelopment of the site. And the use of the site, however, as a temporary RV storage does not really trigger that same level of concern for these items. So this is the proposed site plan submitted with the application. The black rectangles demonstrate potential RV parking locations with an estimate of about 200 stalls, depending on the size of the units. The blue lines indicates the travel route throughout the site. And the red dotted line that you can kind of see that splits the site down the middle that just delineates the transition between the floodway and the flood fringe. And I'll note that the RV storage is only being proposed within the west part of the larger site, within the existing fence line. So what this map shows is the flood risk area for a 1 in 100 event. The area that is hashed in red is the floodway, whereas the area to the north, within that area, the blue area, is the flood fringe. So the general definitions of flood risk area components are as follows. So flood fringe means that part of the flood risk area where water is shallower and moves more slowly. A floodway means that part of the flood risk area where the waters are deepest, fastest, and most destructive. So the flood risk areas were created from a provincial study that was done previously in 1995, I believe. And there are currently new draft mapping in the works by the province, but it has not been finalized as of yet. So this proposal aligns with Council's Strategic Plan Priority 1.9. So the RV storage is a temporary development, and that incremental step while the developer works through the complexities of redeveloping the site. So this is an opportunity to remove an obstacle to assist the developer in their success. In terms of municipal development plan policy, the site is city center within the city center sector. So it's marked on that map by the yellow star. And it's best described as a special use typology. So those are that typology is where specific types of land use, which do not really fit into the broad use categories that we would see throughout the community, are considered on a case-by-case basis. So the site can be considered a brownfield site as a result of its previous use as a major industrial development. Redevelopment of brownfield sites have many economic, social, and environmental benefits for the property owner, the immediate neighborhood, and the community as a whole. Brownfield sites are likely to negatively affect the value of nearby properties and may discourage new development. Remediation of such a site diminishes that environmental impact on the area. So then this has that effect of improving the property values and increasing tax revenue for the municipality. So breathing that new life into the brownfield area helps to improve public health and safety. It utilizes existing infrastructure, which has substantial cost savings for the city, and can lead to new commercial development and employment opportunities, which can benefit the community as a whole. So the proposal for temporary RV storage generally aligns with that MDP policy of bringing those new life to old spaces, as it's a stepping stone for the potential future redevelopment of a brownfield site that has been vacant for 10 years. So the site is zoned direct control in the land use bylaw. Council can establish parameters for development as it considers necessary in respect of any site within this district. And in doing so, it may vary, relax, or waive any development regulations or any provisions of the municipal servicing standards or issue any directions it considers appropriate to the commission, so in that case, the Municipal Planning Commission, with respect to the commission's power to make a decision on an application for a development permit involving that site. So in this particular situation, there has been no resolutions passed that would direct MPC for approval, so then the application comes directly to council. This proposal aligns with the land use bylaw and the purpose of a direct control district, which is to allow council to make a decision on a proposal in circumstances where a site requires a unique approach to establish parameters for future development. Okay, so this is just, again, that overhead view of the site. And then these next images I'm going to cycle through are captured from our drone that we had circle the site. So this is just starting at the entrance of the site near Tractor Avenue. And then these next series of pictures are from ground level. So this is near the entrance looking west towards the north side of the building and the curve in Allowance Avenue. This is looking back towards the entrance to the site. This is a view along Allowance Avenue. Looking east towards the two main buildings. And then this is looking east from the very far corner of the parcel. Again, looking east from the south edge of the property. This is the site access to the development, so it is fenced. Looking west between the two main buildings. Looking towards the east end of the building from the fence line. And then also looking back west along that south fence line. And then just to give that sense of scale of the site, this is about halfway along, looking also to the west along that south fence line. So administration's recommendation is, it is recommended through the Municipal Planning Commission that City Council approved development permit PLDP 2023-0577 to change the use of 1222 Allowance Avenue to a self-storage use subject to conditions listed. And so I won't read through the conditions because they're quite lengthy, but if council has any questions, I can certainly walk through them. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you. City Clerk, did we receive any written submissions? And can you please confirm that we met all of the obligations under the MGA and our procedure bylaw?
Thank you, Mayor Clark. So the direct control development permit application for self-storage, RV storage, that is at 1222 Allowance Avenue Southeast, was given public notice and published in the Medicine Hat News on Saturday, September 2nd, 2023, and Saturday, September 9th, 2023. A notification letter related to the subject direct control development permit application was also mailed to 17 adjacent and abutting property owners on August 31st, 2023. No written submissions were received by the deadline for inclusion in the published agenda, and in fact, even after that deadline had passed, no submissions or inquiries of any kind were received at the clerk's office. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The applicant may have a minimum of 10 minutes to make a presentation to council and administration if they are present. Okay. And now would be the opportunity to ask, for council to ask questions to the applicant if they wanted to speak, or the administrative, manager Sissons, if there are any questions about the presentation he gave. Go ahead.
Through the chair, Mr. Sissons, item 2 up here, if you could just have a look at it. So can you clarify for everyone and the public, initiation of construction, development, or commencement of land use within 1 year from the date of the development permit must be issued. Consistent construction progress must be maintained. So can you just elaborate on that and what progress looks like and how that will be observed and satisfied?
So through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, so that's a new condition from about 4 or 5 months ago that we started adding as a standard condition on all development permits. So that the requirement to be commenced within a year has been around for quite a while, but the concept of you must be making continual progress, you must complete the development within a certain time frame. So in this case, this development permit is time limited from the date of approval, should council decide to approve that or not tonight, and they would have 3 years to operate that land use on site. So in this case, if they took 2 years to complete the development, that would use up a substantial portion of the time. And really, there's not much on-site work to be done for this one, so we don't anticipate that any lengthy construction or anything like that would happen because there's very minimal site work.
Just follow up through the chair. So again, just if you can highlight the, what is progress? I mean, are there hurdle marks? Are there expectations that are delineated at the onset of the permit that will allow, I guess, illustrate that there is progress being made, or is it just strictly a verbal agreement that progress is being made? I'm just trying to understand it, and what different intervals of time are there on-site meetings to ensure that that's being done?
So often in, through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, often in development permits, you'll see time-related conditions. So like, as an example, you know, a stormwater management plan and all the infrastructure must be completed within a certain amount of time. Or a new access to the roadway must be completed, or a development agreement must be signed. In this particular case, there really is not much that we would be monitoring. We would be looking at the site plan to see if they're conforming to that initial approval based on that site plan. We would be looking to make sure that as they're placing RVs on site, that they're not interfering with any constraints within the site, and then as well is just a continual monitoring to make sure that there is that clear path throughout the site as indicated on the site plan. Those are kind of the big three that we would be observing.
Thank you.
Councillor Hyder?
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair, to Mr. Sissons. Maybe just for some clarity, we could go back to the drawings of, and maybe for myself, where actually is the RV storage going to be, or is it all, is there a like a map of where, any specifics on that? And probably I missed it. And is it close to the creek? Oh, the creek that runs through there, or?
Sure, so it's through the chair. So this is the site plan as indicated. So it does, I'll just kind of walk through it again. So
Yeah, sorry.
the shaded areas are generally where they are proposing to have RVs. They've kind of indicated, just for demonstration purposes, some of the smaller black squares as different sizes of RVs. The area in green is the existing fence line, and if you go, try and find this site, it's about the east fence line is about halfway through the property. So essentially the RVs would be surrounding the building. The east half of the property would not be used. There is a railway spur that runs along that south edge.
Yeah.
And then there's the kind of environmental reserve that the city owns adjacent to the creek.
Just to follow. And how about road access? As far as, will the city be involved with having to, there's just one way in and one way out, correct?
So through the chair, correct, the access is off Tractor Avenue. You can see it right there, the blue lines leading up to the northeast portion.
Okay, so basically, sorry, through the one more. It's just, there's going to be no power, no, it's just like another RV storage unit with no power or anything like that, correct?
So through the chair, correct, yeah, the permit is very specific in that it is only, so it's the general classification is called a self-storage facility, which would normally entail things like CCAN, storage, RVs, et cetera. In this particular case, because it is in the flood area, we restricted that only to RVs, which could be moved off-site quite quickly. So the permit is very specific in that it is only RV storage allowed within basically as shown in the gray areas.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just have two questions. So one is about condition number 7. It says the development permit is valid for 3 years from the approval date. And you had talked about this being temporary RV storage. And I just want to make sure I understand what that 3 years is meant to tell us when we look at the condition.
So through the chair, most development permits are typically an indefinite nature. We do have that authority to impose conditions limiting the approval of a development for a specified time period. So in this circumstance, we felt that 3 years was a reasonable amount of time for the developer to take that next step and kind of get the plans developed and work on their next project within the site. The 3 years would start from the date of approval and would end, so subsequent 3 years from that point. So if they were wanting to extend that, they would have to come back to council. If there's any other development that would be, that the developer would want to see on site, they would have to come back to council as well.
Thank you very much. That helps me a lot. And second question is about condition number 6. So it says in the event of a flood, all RVs must be removed from the site is the landowner's responsibility. So I have two questions here. One, it says landowner's not developer, and I wondered why that language difference. And then my other question was, if those RVs couldn't be removed quickly and in flood situations that is imperative, would their presence there interfere with any flood mitigation actions by emergency management?
So through the chair, with respect to your first question, there's really not much different. It's just, it would be up to the landowner. We're assuming that the landowner would be the same company as the developer is today. But at that point in time, it would be up to whoever is in possession of the land and operating this business to contact any RV owners, get them out, and if not, haul them off site themselves. With respect to the second part of the question is, would this interfere with any flood mitigation efforts? So typically with floods within Medicine Hat, there's a little bit more lead time than some of the communities upstream. So we do have some time to implement things. And I'll just cycle back actually to the site plan and just kind of rewinding back to the 2013 flood. If people remember that, a lot of the berming was actually placed along that railway spur. So when the flood came, there was some temporary methods. We have obviously got a much more robust plan today, but there was temporary methods that were placed along that railway spur right up to the intersection. So when you look at the site plan, they would be clear of that. So it wouldn't really interfere with what's happening on site. So ideally, all the RVs would be off the site, but as they would go in, they would place it down on the railway line. Again, I'm assuming.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, and through the chair to Mr. Sissons. I only have one question, and I think it's probably obvious to everybody but me, but on number 4, the permit application is for the use of RV storage only. No shipping containers are permitted as part of this application. Why would that be? Like, why was that specified there?
So through the chair, within the definition of self-storage, it talks about various different types of self-storage, so shipping containers, RVs. So if another developer had a site and they were seeking approval for a self-storage, they would be entitled to do both. Whereas we're restricting it only to RVs, as those are much easier to move off-site in a short period of time.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions for administration, I'm going to invite any members of the public who wish to speak to this resolution to come down to the podium and state your first and last name and whether you'll be speaking for or against. Each individual who wishes to speak will be allotted 5 minutes to make their presentation. I don't believe we had any groups registered. Nope, so just 5 minutes, and then council will be provided an opportunity to ask questions to the members of the public. Come on down. Thank you. Hi, Caleb. First and last name?
Caleb Orge, and I'm going to be speaking in favor of this particular development. Insofar as it's sat empty for 10 years, something is better than nothing in general. I'm kind of disappointed it's not a more ambitious project, but I do have one question, which is, what's the city gain from approving this particular development? I forget how the city calculates increased value added if a business opens on a site. What would be the increase in property tax the city might gain from allowing this to go forward?
Thank you for your question. City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you through the chair, and I will ask Managing Director Egert to answer this. Thank you.
Thank you. Through Mayor Clark. I don't have the exact number. I know that the rules for assessments is very clearly laid out in terms of land, so that'll continue. And in terms of buildings, whether they're temporary or permanent. So in this case, there's no buildings, but whether or not there's anything addition to what is being planned here that may be considered accessible under the Municipal Government Act, I just don't have that information with me right now.
Okay, good, thank you. Sorry, does council have any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none. Does council have any additional questions for administration or any of the other points raised? Seeing none, I will now declare this public hearing closed, and we will move back to any debate on the motion that council approved development permit PLD P2 0230577, an application for self-storage at 1222 Allowance Avenue Southeast, subject to the conditions as presented. Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I just want to comment on the benefits to the developer if we are to approve this. There's a very complex and strategic business plan in place in this particular location. I understand this is a bit tangential, but I think it's important to state anyways. And I think that allowing this space to be a rental property for a temporary amount of time creates a revenue opportunity to further support and encourage the project that we hope to see come to fruition in the next decade. And I think it makes good sense. In regards to the development permit itself, there's nothing that stands out to me as being problematic. I think that it is clear that it is, there's been due diligence to ensure it's thumbs up.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. So I just wanted to make one comment about this. When it comes to these direct control locations, my main concern is always their proximity to flooding in the creeks. And when I saw this arrive on the agenda, that was my first thought, and I was really pleased to see the robust plan in place for dealing with the rental, I'm assuming they'll all be rentals, on the property if flooding was to happen and the conditions set around that. So I wanted to thank the developer and the administration, whoever worked together to have that presented in this package to us. Thank you.
Counselor Dumanowski?
Through the chair, yeah, I prepared to support the application today. For me, I kind of like the question that Caleb actually had, is this the highest and best use? I'm not an expert, but I would argue that most people would not see this as highest and best use. However, it has been sitting vacant for a decade, and if that gives cause or opportunity for some investment within that 3-year plan, more robust permanent investment in its development or build out of some sort, I'm prepared to support it. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. And that is passed unanimously. So we'll go back to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. There are several items for reception. Are there any items that any counselor would like to pull for discussion from the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion?
I move that council adopts the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right, we will vote on the motion. That's passed. Moving on to item number 9 on the agenda, which is delegation. This particular delegation is internal. Item 9.1, presentation asset management strategy, water, sewer, storm, and transportation. And we have with us Acting Director of Municipal Works, Stan Nowakowski. Welcome. Mr. Nowakowski, go ahead.
Your Worship, members of council, good evening. Today I will run through a quick presentation on our asset management strategy. And this is a summary of what happened about 10 years ago, 2014. We came in with the development and infrastructure, water, sewer, storm, and transportation aging infrastructure policy. It was adopted in 2014. That policy just dealt with municipal works and with environmental utilities assets. So that included the water, sewer, transportation, and storm systems. That strategy was based on the principles that are up on the slide now, the principles of asset management, which include basically what do we own, what is it worth, what is the condition of the assets, what service levels do we aspire to meet with our infrastructure, as well as an investment plan to reach those goals. So just looking at what we own, water system, that includes things like water mains, feeder lines, valves, manholes. Sanitary sewer system includes things like the main sewer pipes, manholes, pumps, lift stations, things like that. Transportation network includes the road systems, the sidewalks, traffic signals, street lights, multi-use trails, airport And then finally, the storm system, which also includes the underground pipes, catch basins, leads, storm ponds, lift stations. And since 2014, when this came forward, we've also added in the flood management infrastructure. Looking at everything put together, total replacement value of all of those assets, total approximately $8 billion. Looking at the next principle of asset management, we look at the asset condition. With EU and MW, we have established inspection programs for each of our assets based on current industry standards and best engineering practices. There's different kinds of condition assessment that we do. For things like pumps or other mechanical devices, there's scheduled inspections where we'll go in once or twice a year and make sure everything's working good, if anything needs replacing. There's also visual inspections that we do, including roads are a good example, where we'll do a third of our road network visually inspected every year. So a third of the city gets done every year. Also our sewer pipe and storm pipe, we have a CCTV, closed circuit TV program that will inspect some of the pipe. And then also, when we can't do scheduled inspections or visual inspections, we do predictive condition. And that's based on age and material. And that's typically related to underground pipes where we don't have CCTV information. So water lines or sewer lines that we don't have TV on. When we have all that information together, we use a risk-based approach to identify critical infrastructure. And by that I mean we'll take all of our inspection information together and we will determine what infrastructure is a higher priority for all of our assets. Information up to that point is included in our State of Infrastructure report, which is essentially it's attachment 1 of the briefing note that was provided to Council. So that we have a pretty good handle on. Our next steps, a couple of things that we need to work on of those 5 principles that I presented earlier. Service levels. We need to have an understanding of service levels. So first off, just an explanation of what that is. That's the expected quality or condition of a given service or asset. So it's basically what level or what condition do you want an asset to be? What is the expected level that you want to meet? I'll take a road as a good example. In our State of Infrastructure, we present the varying service levels, whether they're poor, fair, good, very good. We look at that and we need to determine what is an appropriate service level for a particular road. We also look at the primary user of the infrastructure. So there are different service levels that we look at for different primary users. So roads, again, as an example, we have different types of roads. We have arterial roads, collector roads that are high traffic volume. So a lot of people use those roads. Local roads, more just the residents that live in that neighborhood will use that road. So a lot lower volume. So we look at service levels should be different when we look at those 2 types of assets. We also look at liability and risk associated with an asset failure. So certain assets, if they fail, the liability is a lot higher to the city than certain other assets. For example, a bridge. If there's ever a bridge failure, that would be a higher liability to the city as well as a higher risk, both if there was ever a disaster and a bridge collapsed, there's that risk, but there's also just the risk of shutting off a major part of our transportation network. So I guess in a nutshell, identifying appropriate service levels sets the targets that we should aspire to for our asset management plan. And also defining those service levels is very important. It's key in our developing of our financial requirements, our plan to do asset management. As far as investment plan, this slide illustrates it's a infrastructure degradation curve. So it's basically how the infrastructure looks over time. When you first build it, it's at 100% basically, very good condition. Over time, it starts to degrade, starts to deteriorate, and eventually you get to the end of life. The key message of this slide is you can do different treatments on your assets to maintain those service levels and to keep your assets working properly. Preventative maintenance, you can do line flushing, sewer line flushing, or hydrant flushing to maintain those pipes. Fairly inexpensive, but it does help improve the condition of a line. As far as roads go, preventative maintenance, you could do crack sealing earlier rather than wait and have to do a more extensive rehabilitation or replacement of the whole road. So the key message here is the longer you wait to do something, the more expensive it becomes and the lower your condition goes. This slide just illustrates that same idea. It's courtesy of the state of Delaware. On the left, you'll see, this is the same stretch of road. On the left, if you wait until your road goes from an excellent condition to a fair condition, you're going to pay $80,000 to overlay that road. And in 30 years, you'll be right back to that fair condition. On the other hand, if you do a less extensive, less expensive treatment, like a crack sealing, you do that a couple of times over that 30 years, you're only going to spend $40,000. These numbers are just for illustration purposes. But in the end, you'll have a better condition road. It'll still be in that good range. And then just to tie everything together, the investment plan, it's a balancing act between your capital investment, your operating and maintenance costs. It depends on what the city's, it goes back to the service levels and the expectations. What is the liability that the city wants to take on? What is the risk? Also, what is the community expectation? What do the people want to see? So that's one of our next steps. We need to determine and identify those service levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hirsch.
Through the chair, Mr. Milankowski, thank you for the presentation. Obviously, it's, at billions of dollars, it's a key piece of our infrastructure, key asset for the city citizens and the city of Medicine Hat. So I appreciate the commentary, and I remember the roadway system master plan and all this stuff that over the years we talked about, and so I appreciate the work that gets done from work that when it gets to full degradation, that you have to almost rip everything out, especially in roads, and I know there's been great innovations on pipes and the linings and all that stuff that gets to come into play. So I actually appreciate all the innovation that's going on. I thought, I was thinking, my thoughts become more globally, more general. You know, and obviously, every municipality carries an infrastructure deficit. So I'm just wondering, do comparisons exist relative to our municipal peers? Is that something that, and where do we rank in that level of work being done as far as our deficits, our roads, the pipes underneath? Are we at par at our peers? I mean, you talk about relative to the citizens and our expectations as well, but I don't know if any comparisons exist between other municipalities?
Your Worship, we are, or we have been in the past working with other municipalities in Alberta, working on a key performance indicator project. So there is some information available. However, it's difficult to compare apples to apples because you have different sized municipalities and different service levels, different expectations. So we are part of that, but it is difficult to compare, say, us to a Calgary or us to a Banff or Canmore.
Supplemental, so I certainly appreciate that. I guess I'm just, so my presumption is relative to others, it's shared of best practices, like you said, KPIs, et cetera, gets shared among the groups via, I don't know, what is the conduit in terms of how municipalities meet? Is that through Alberta municipalities then, or, okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, yes, that's correct. It's, you're taxing my memory. I can't remember exactly
Sorry.
what it's called. It's Infrastructure Alberta Association.
I'm sure there's an acronym.
We are part of that, yes.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you, and through the chair. Thank you for the presentation, and I know there's a lot more information in the agenda package as well. I know this isn't a very glamorous subject, but anyone who has lived any amount of time without running water or a sewage system or bounced their way to work on a bad road appreciates and understands the value of this kind of work. So thank you very much. I did have one question and it wasn't necessarily part of this presentation, but it came from the committee, and unfortunately I wasn't at that meeting. And it's just on page 41 of the agenda, and it's regarding the bridge conditions. And I was a little confused with the photo that was used and the explanation giving on Finley Bridge. So it says that the Finley Bridge was poor, but then it says in 2019 before deck replacement. Does that mean that Finley Bridge is still in poor condition, or it's in good condition now? Because it didn't seem to correspond with the pie charts that I was looking at.
Through the chair, no, we used the Finley Bridge example because that was our only poor bridge that we had that was a vehicle bridge. And that was before we did the deck replacement, so it was in poor condition. We did the deck replacement in 2020, I believe it was, and after that, it's considered now good now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure for clarity for the public too, because looking at the slide, it might be a bit confusing. Thank you.
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, Acting Director Nowakowski, that's what you are at the moment? That's what it says in the agenda, so I want to get your title right. I want to tell you a little story. So when I receive the agendas, I download them, and then I work on them on Saturday mornings while my children are like playing, watching TV, whatever it is kids like to do on Saturday mornings, not chores with me. So I get my chores done and get this through. But this Saturday, one of my children happened to wander along while my pie charts were up because I was looking through the presentation. So we've heard a really executive summary here, but contained within the agenda is your actual whole report with a lot of pie charts and really interesting information in it. And I say interesting because it caught my 10-year-olds, one of my 10-year-olds, the other one preferred YouTube over this. It sort of caught her eye, and she said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "I'm kind of looking at a report card of all of the structures in Medicine Hat." And she said, "What kind of report card?" I said, "Well, they have to check and make sure that they're healthy and how much they cost to fix them and make sure they don't leave them too long until they're broken." So we end up having this conversation about it. So then she wants to go through all the pie charts and ask me about 300 questions about all of them. And she said at the end, she said, we should learn this in school because we don't know enough about our city really. And we had someone say to us last council meeting, where do our tax dollars go? This would be a one very clear place where they do go. So I just wanted to compliment all of the departments that pulled this information together and this presentation that was given, because it was extremely informative just to go through without having questions, but it was thorough enough that I could then answer my 10-year-old's questions. So it was informative and educational in many ways, and I really enjoyed learning so much about all of the infrastructure. And my favorite thing that I learned was we have 529 kilometers of sidewalks in Medicine Hat. So we have to go to Edmonton next week. A few of us are going to the Alberta municipalities. So really, we could take our sidewalks, we just flatten them out. We could walk to Edmonton on Medicine Hat sidewalks, which is quite something when you think of, we're talking about maintaining them, never mind clearing them. So anyway, I found it all very interesting, and I thank you very much for putting it together and presenting today.
All right, no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Dumanowski? Okay.
Now that the presentation is complete, is this appropriate time to make comments or not yet?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So I want to thank Mr. Nowakowski for his presentation, and the comments are well stated. And I guess the only thing I would add is, you know, when the public observes, and they observe lots and they bring it to our attention, they see construction or digging in a road pit beyond a surface level asphalt overlay, and they question about that, or they see Dunmore Road or Kerry Drive or some other major arterial road being resurfaced, and only a few years ago wasn't it just resurfaced, and or they see some of the deep sewer areas being replaced at the same time as roadway, a block at a time in maybe an established area, and then suddenly there's a discontinuation. All of this is attributed to a robust asset management strategy, and it really, I remember its initiation, and it has proven to be incredibly invaluable, really, to our city. And the reason you see those illustrations in my wonderful examples is because of that asset management. There's no need to surmise that just because it's older or it's in a mature state that it is no longer maintaining its integrity and therefore needs to be replaced. And I think what this allows, as has been presented by Mr. Nowakowski, is through closed circuit TV, I always get that wrong, cameras to visual reviewing or other mechanisms, they're able to be very precise or surgical in their replacement or rehabilitation, and that's huge. And the other point is whether it's a repair or a preventative measure. And I love the example of filling the cracks, which seems pretty common sense to most people, but in many cases adds significant lifespan to for example, roadway systems. So this is an ongoing strategy that benefits the city from the standpoint of replacing infrastructure that needs to be replaced before there's full repair required or full failure. And now we're in a time crunch to replace it. And it allows your tax dollars to be very equally used in a very precise way. And as has been illustrated, my parting comment, there's significant dollars in investment in all our infrastructure. So the more precise, the more surgical we can be with that, the better we serve all neighborhoods of our community, but ultimately the public person. I think it's an investment well-intentioned. And parting comment is that we have to be careful, because I know in previous council terms there's temptations to cut back or claw back on these investments, and I'm not picking on any councillor or councillor, just that it's a temptation, especially during very difficult times where you're trying to find the dollars. The investment in this infrastructure needs to be maintained and continued. It may not immediately take notice by the public, but certainly when it fails, there is, and the cost is exponential. So just wanted to make those parting comments. Thank you.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Managing Director Bohan and Acting Director Nowakowski, because asset management is critically important for us. I also wanted to say, once this is done, Managing Director Egert did have an answer to the question on the previous issue about the taxation. So if we can wedge that in, that would be perfect. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Managing Director Egert.
Okay, through Mayor Clark, thanks for the opportunity just to clarify. We talked about land and the impact on taxation, just a clarifying statement. So we do, through the assessment regulation, recognize income rental rates on stalls that would be available for rental. So that's distinct from raw land that's remaining as part of the site. Further, if there's any further site improvements, sheds, offices, use of buildings, that'll be assessed based on the rules as well. The final comment would be, if the applicant chooses to contact the assessment department, they'd be willing to sit down and go through what the potential impact could be for both assessment and for taxation.
Thank you very much. So having concluded the presentation, we'll move to item 11.1 under new business, Medicine Hat Economic Development 2024 Operational Structure and Budget. And we have a presentation from Director of Economic Development, Selena McLean-Moore. Welcome.
I'm trying something new today. I wanted to use my laptop instead of notes, so sorry. Okay. All right. Why isn't it working? My computer's not working. Of course.
Yes, always the risk of using the technology.
I'm trying to be innovative. Yeah, exactly.
Will your notes suffice, or would you like to take, okay.
No, I was
Thank you.
definitely prepared. So, yeah. Thank you. Okay. Can you hear me okay? We're good? Okay. It's the first time I've done this. So, so good evening, Council. It's great to be here. I'm really excited to be able to present the work that I've been doing over the past 10 weeks on the Economic Development Department. I was brought on to lead the Economic Development Department, and my first order of business was to determine what our priorities are going to be, and what, from the priorities, what are the resources we need to actually get things done. So over the past 10 weeks, as I've been working on this organizational structure and budget, I've had an opportunity to engage with a lot of people. I've done some research, and it's been really, really interesting and enjoyable, actually. I've talked to many city staff, and I've talked to organizations outside of the city, economic development support agencies, and businesses. And what I will say is that there is a real desire to get economic development, the department going in the city again. The city staff, I've just been amazed with. They have, we've got a lot of experts and a lot of experience with the city employees, and they've been a really great support as I've been able to create what I'm going to present today. Okay, so as I had noted, when I'm done tonight, I will have provided you with 2 options and a recommendation for your consideration on the organizational and funding model for the department. I will tell the story of where we are as a community today, where we want to be, and provide suggestions on how we move forward in a more cohesive, holistic fashion toward that vision. I will also provide an overview of my recommendations, highlighting the pillars and tactics we will require for success. And lastly, I will end with the financial and scope implications of the 2 options. Okay, so our current state. We are facing challenges, and we need to clearly define them. Based on the latest census numbers, a few things stand out. Between 2016 and 2021, our population only increased by 11 individuals. Our working age population declined by 1,500, and we had a 2.4% decrease in small and medium-sized businesses. This means that our population is aging, and we have less people to fill job vacancies, which naturally leads to a decrease in service and money exchanges. As well, based on the latest labor data and a recently released report, Labor Market Skills Gap in Southeast Alberta, there are fluctuations in occupations and unemployment, which indicate skills gaps in renewable and technology sectors, and it shows a need for upskilling and alignment with our evolving demands. Our housing market, which is similar to the majority of municipalities across Canada, is trending towards unaffordability, leaving barriers to investment and accessibility. And there is a perceived lack of city business supports. Lastly, there is a community fatigue around the lack of consistency in the Economic Development Department. So we have some challenges. What are our strengths? On the flip side of our challenges, we have an amazing community, and we've got a lot going for us. We are home to a high quality of life and place, with a lower cost of living, fantastic amenities, and an entrepreneurial culture. We have a strategic advantage when it comes to attracting and retaining investment with fully integrated municipal services. So what does that mean? Unlike other municipalities where investors have to go to multiple entities for information, contracts, purchase agreements, etc., we provide a one-stop shop for services. Things like internal land sales and development, planning and engineering, economic development, and utilities allow us to streamline the investor experience. This is one of the things that makes our city unique. As well, our diverse energy portfolio of projects and partnerships support the federal energy transition commitments. And while our city may not have grown much over the last few years, we are still attracting investment. This fall, we will welcome manufacturer S3 Group, which within 5 years could employ up to 100 workers. S3 leadership shared with me that during their decision-making period, they were extremely impressed with the support they received from the city and community partners. As well, in July, Bevo Farms announced an investment into Medicine Hatch, which will bring the Aurora Sun facility back to life. Finally, with a refreshed vision and a more holistic approach, there are endless opportunities for increased engagement with local business, industry, and supported agencies. In my conversations with stakeholders, it is apparent that we have a group of engaged partners and organizations ready to work collectively for the betterment of the city and region. So, what exactly does economic development mean? In my experience, defining economic development can be ambiguous. It's a dynamic mix of tactics, and many organizations hold value with the different parts. So it can mean different things to different people. It's always best for an organization or municipality to choose a definition that aligns with their vision. The Economic Developers of Alberta definition encompasses a holistic, balanced view of the work. They define economic development as the process of developing and diversifying suitable economic, social, and political environments so that balanced growth may be realized, increasing the wealth of the community. To achieve balanced growth, the triple bottom line is vital to decision-making, taking into account economic, environment, and social contexts. So I realize that you as council are very used to taking a lot of different contexts into a decision. And as economic developers, we would take a lot of different contexts as well, like we talk about with the triple bottom line: economic, environment, and social. I'm going to give you an example. It was years and years ago. I was working with actually a city staff person who had called me because they had received an inquiry from a canola crushing facility that was looking at the ADM mills. So what we know right now, obviously, is that they could have never actually went into the ADM mills because they wouldn't have allowed another food processor in there. But we did have the conversation about what would happen if we had a canola crushing facility in the ADM area. And the one thing that we talked about was that any type of canola crusher is going to exude a smell. So the canola is crushed into an oil, and then that smell goes into the atmosphere. So ADM mills being right below the Stampede area, all those residents would have had that smell. So basically, we decided at that point in time, we didn't even look into it any further because it just, the social impact of that facility would have never gone over with the municipality. So given all this, from experience, I can tell you that economic development is a marathon, not a sprint. Managing expectations is so important in this work, and it takes a long-term commitment on behalf of council and administration. Okay. In this profession, I often hear the term, "we are moving the needle." We make practical and tactical decisions and then take the actions that lead to small wins today and greater outcomes tomorrow. So how is Medicine Hat Economic Development going to do things differently? I propose we approach economic development with a refreshed vision, adopting this new framework. This framework showcases the processes needed to move the economic development needle. Again, multiple small wins will lead to greater outcomes. So I want you to direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen. I'm going to talk about the drivers. So typically in an economic development plan, most of you have probably heard these typical tactics: business retention and expansion, workforce development, investment attraction, marketing. These are all typically what we hear economic developers are going to focus on. And they are a big part of what we do. There is a symbiotic relationship between all of them because the business retention and expansion really, that research actually leads into a lot of the decision-making we do for the workforce development and investment attraction. So business retention and expansion, typically sometimes I hear it's called the heart of the economic development strategy because what we do with, I'm going to call it BRE. What we do with a BRE program is we will work with businesses to understand what their challenges are, what their needs are, what the opportunities are, and we identify trends that we can help them with. And why I would consider that the heart of the economic development strategy is because when we understand what our businesses need and when we understand what the core challenges are of the community, we then know how to focus our workforce development, we then know what types of businesses to attract, and we can get to work on the rest of the drivers. So drivers are extremely important to the process. Sometimes a part of the process of economic development that is overlooked are the enablers. And without the enablers, without us paying attention to the enablers, the economic development process can fail or at least not be as successful as it could be. So what does infrastructure, governance, and healthy communities actually mean? I'm going to tell you another story about a community. It was a community that I served years back that I was supporting them with their economic development strategic plan. Now, this community, the person I was working with told me a story about how a local entrepreneur decided that they wanted to build a Tim Hortons on their main street. And this community was, ecstatic. They were ecstatic to finally have that Tim Hortons, so all of their community members could go and get coffee, and everything would be just great then. And so they got to work. They opened the file. They started looking at greenfield and brownfield sites, and lo and behold, what they didn't realize was that years back, the council had passed a policy or a bylaw saying that no drive-throughs were allowed to be built on Main Street. So it stalled the process. They went back, council made the revision to the bylaw, and they ended up getting their Tim Hortons. But my question is that, what if this wasn't a local entrepreneur investor? What if this was somebody coming from outside of the community and saying, there's 3 communities in this area that I'm interested in building one Tim Hortons. If that policy or bylaw hadn't been in place, or hadn't been in place, they probably would have had more challenges in getting that investment. So we look at things like bylaws, right? Our governance. Let's talk closer to home. The flooding of 2013, where we evacuated 10,000 residents and businesses, or most recent events, the COVID-19 pandemic, that affected our economy greatly. Are we prepared as a municipality to support our business owners through unforeseen situations? Giving the enablers the attention and they deserve is crucial to long-term success. If we lack housing supply, or if a business license process is too cumbersome, or an incentive policy doesn't address the actual need, the business environment can flounder. And regardless of how much attention we pay to the pieces, like investment retention and expansion of our businesses, economic development programs will struggle. Okay, I would be remiss to not mention the critical success factor for economic developers. Relationships are the most important element to a successful economic development program. In my past role before joining the city, we had a saying, "My relationships are my currency." We had to make deposits into our relationships in order to make a withdrawal. Relationships are the currency of today, and rebuilding trust within the community and region with our businesses, industry, and economic development support organizations will be the key to getting done what needs to get done. The Economic Development Department is not an island. In order for us to perform to our potential, strong, trusting relationships, internal and external to City Hall, will be an ultimate priority. So using the framework that I just described, I propose that Medicine Hat Economic Development lead 4 key pillars deliberately aligned with Council's strategic plan. So what are the pillars? Number 1, business retention and expansion will provide support to existing business and industry. So I had mentioned earlier, the BRE is really about surveying businesses to understand them better, to understand our economy better, and to be able to prioritize what it is we need to do as an economic development office, as a city, as a group of stakeholders to be able to support our business community. Number 2, workforce development. Our workforce development staff will understand labor market needs and work with partners to provide support and resources to employers. So an example I worked on years ago when the economy was very similar to what it is now. Our unemployment rate was actually, I think, less than this. I think it was at 4%. Basically, anybody who needed a job could get a job. And there were employers like today who were really desperately looking to be able to fill those positions. So I worked on a project where we worked on profiles. So we profiled the sectors that were struggling to find employees, And we then worked on profiles that matched the occupations with the sectors so that we were able to use our relationships with human resource organizations, economic development organizations to be able to support workers that were interested in changing their skill set, on skilling up to match what the employers needed. So that would be an example of something we would do with workforce development. So number 3, investment attraction. Investment attraction will support the attraction of new business and industry to the city. So the key element of investment attraction is really truly understanding what the needs are, what the gaps are in the community, and aligning what we attract with those needs and those gaps and opportunities. Another key to investment attraction is the relationships between the Economic Development Office and different levels of government. There's a lot of different support with the province and with the feds that we can use their support to promote what we want coming to Medicine Hat. And then from there, we work with investors. We support with identifying capital, opportunities for capital, and we we provide the aftercare so the investors feel that they're being supported by the municipality. So finally, number 4, investment and growth readiness will build the levers needed to support investment and growth. So this is really the enablers part of the portion of the framework. So, we're connecting with other departments. We are making sure our incentives match the needs, and streamlining processes within City Hall are just some of the examples. So to getting this work done, our team will focus on key supporting functions, strategy, targets, and key performance indicators, program and policy development, data and analysis, cross-department collaboration, marketing and communication, community engagement, and partners and stewardship. And I will say, and I didn't put this in my notes, but I will say that we do all of the work that we are looking at doing as an economic development department aligns with every single priority on the council strategic plan. Okay, so I'm going to give you an idea of how our work will roll out. As I stated before, good work must start with a solid foundation, and managing expectations with council and the broader community will be extremely important. Again, we are working towards inching the needle forward. The first year will involve recruitment, strategy development, and implementation. First, addressing labor shortages using the Rural Renewal Program will be a priority. Second, the Regional Economic Development Strategy will help build relationships with neighboring communities, and we will work together to determine key assets, competitive advantages, roles and responsibilities, and actions for the betterment of Southeast Alberta. We are targeting the launch of both of these programs in Q1 and Q2 of 2024. Once we are fully staffed, Medicine Hat Economic Development will develop a strategy and implementation plan to address workforce, business retention and expansion, and investment attraction. Beginning immediately, our office will re-engage with federal, provincial, regional, and local organizations to let them know that Medicine Hat is back in business. Finally, we will continue conversations with internal decision makers to find ways to work together to provide the best customer service to business and industry that we possibly can. A while back, the Economic Development Department was reduced to a bare-bones staff to give time to consider a new approach. So how are we going to tackle this new approach? In your package, you will see 2 options that have been provided. Both propose an increase to current staffing levels and include an amendment to the 2024 operational budget. It is recommended that Council approve Option 1 as the preferred 2024 Economic Development Department structure and budget. Option 1 includes a budget increase of $279,000, which includes an additional 3.5 staff and results in a total operational budget of $1.81 million. So what are the implications of this proposed increase? Over the years, the city has proposed and implemented a variety of different economic development models, yet none have included a comprehensive, holistic approach. Currently, our organization structure is made up of 3 individuals, and in order to succeed, we need to be resourced appropriately. So with that said, I'm proposing a renewed focus from previous models. In this slide, you will see 4 pillars as presented earlier, and the comparison between the scope of services. So option 1 will provide a full suite of services and will support workforce and rural renewal, business retention and expansion, investment attraction, and investment and growth readiness. Option 2 will be under-resourced. Due to limited staff, the department will not be able to deliver the full suite of economic development services and will need to prioritize. Because this council strategic plan places a focus on working with existing business and industry, the department will take a responsive rather than proactive approach to investment attraction. A few final things to consider. Number 1, rural renewal was not a priority of previous department iterations. This designation alone will require 1 full-time position. Number 2, utilizing a shared position with the corporate planning and performance department brings the overall corporate budget investment down from $279,000 to $240,000. And finally, and maybe most importantly, number 3, unlike previous department iterations where the majority of the financial resources were allocated to senior level management, I am proposing to essentially flatten the structure to provide the staff that will make the impact needed in our community. Essentially, our larger footprint will reflect the support we can provide to our business community. So that's my presentation. I look forward to building and leading a team that supports Council's priorities and leads to impactful work for the economic and social benefit of our community and region. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hirsch.
Director McLean-Moore, thank you very much for the presentation. I certainly appreciate the effort in terms of building a solid foundation. Obviously, that's a key piece. It's interesting, though, your department will always have to build on the fly in the end because of opportunities that exist or potentially to exist for us to look at chasing after. And I guess that leads a little bit to my few questions I had. You know, we talk about relationship and as that as currency, and as my day job, it's absolutely critical. You have to have solid relationships. You have to demonstrate or somehow send a signal that you want to be or in the game. So I guess in the interim on building that foundation, what do you propose? Would be the action plan, and how would you tackle if there was something of an imminent opportunity for the city of Medicine Hat? And I understand you made references to business retention, et cetera, and I appreciate that. That's a key piece as well. I'm just looking in terms of we've been all kind of taking our breath away in terms of some of the new industry that's coming and different changes and stuff like that. So what's your thoughts in regards to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, this is a scenario that I have dealt with over the last few weeks. And what I'll say, I'll actually allude to my comments at the beginning of my presentation, that we have a really, really strong staff here with the city. And so when we get investment inquiries, I have a team that's not even within my department at this point in time that I can access support from. And in fact, I will say that there was a point in time a few weeks ago where we assembled a team like that, and we were able to reply to, we had a response within 5 days, a really strong response in my opinion. I think that's until, we've got to be nimble. We've always, like you said, we've always got to be nimble. And especially right now, because we just don't have the resources. Like I said, by January, I hope to have staff in place. I have somebody joining us October 3rd. And so, we are growing, we are building, and I will just make sure that, we find a way to deal with those important inquiries that come in.
No, and I appreciate that, and it's certainly not your fault in the situation we find ourselves in, but I feel like that gap in time made us feel like we weren't in the game, and now we kind of have to quickly say, hey, over here, right? So I appreciate that you acknowledge that, and a couple other questions for you. We talk about previous iterations, and I don't want to go down that road, but what I do want to talk about is the fact that some of the steps and efforts that were done, I think really, you're talking about moving the needle. And my question is, how are you going to, what's your path to connect with the movers and shakers of the community, the people? It's not, the onus of responsibility won't land on your shoulders for economic development. I think it's important to state that. You've got 67,000 people that are either your promoters or they're going to be your detractors. And on top of it, and what I mean by that is I'll go up to Lloydminster and visit my in-laws and they'll say, how's things in Medicine Hat? There's your line in the sand. You either get to choose to say, it's fantastic, low cost of living, I don't even know why you don't live here, which they in fact did, they moved down, so good for us. But the question I have is that, how are you gonna connect with maybe the citizenry, but in fact there's other individuals in town that I really leaned into in terms, and I think in some ways we need to connect with to get them on side for our success. You talk about a couple big wins that came to us, and that was actually a result of other people doing some legwork to get it going. And so I'm just wanting to know your thoughts, like how do we engage them? Because there was actually, what I really appreciated was a bit of an advisory group that actually led to some good discussions in terms of next steps and all that. And I guess in some ways, it's kind of the idea of it takes a community, to kind of raise economic development, if you will. So just your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Really good comments. I think we definitely will be utilizing our relationships and our partnerships to get out to community members. So, for instance, I'm speaking to the Urban Development Committee at the Chamber this week. I'm doing a presentation at an assessors conference on Friday on the city of Medicine Hat. What are our assets? What's the data around the city of Medicine Hat? What are the industries? So I think that it's really going to be about just getting out into the community. Another thing I think we need to do as a department is we need to educate people on economic development. We need to be able to really share the message that it is about moving the needle. Like we talked, it's about understanding what our businesses in the community need. All of the things that I've talked about today. So how do we do that? Whether it's through town halls, whether it's through attending other engagement sessions that the city is putting on where we might have a fit, right? I think that partnerships will be a really key place for us to play when it comes to getting our message out there. And that's not even just locally. That's with, making sure we're connecting with the right people with the province of Alberta. The commissioners with the Global Affairs Canada, Invest Alberta, right? There's a lot of different relationships that we can build back up that are going to, we'll be put on the map, so.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your presentation. Very informative. I don't have really many comments, just a couple questions. Obviously, all of us around the Horn heard about economic development through our election, which is 2 years ago now. And we have been it's not your fault, we've been in this stale position since then. there's a couple things. So if I'm Joe Citizen sitting out there, I'd be saying, you're asking for a budget increase of X number of dollars, I forget the number exactly, to staff. Now, aren't we restaffing most of these positions, or are these, I know they're rejigged, but if we to look at the old Invest Medicine Hat budget in its entirety and look at your budget, where are we in comparison? And that might be a question for our city manager, I don't know.
I can answer it. I'm gonna answer it. So basically, we're at a wash with the previous Invest Medicine Hat budget compared to this budget. Invest Medicine Hat budget was 1.79, and we are 1.81. But I will say that and I mentioned in my presentation that 0.5 of so we've got a 0.5 position that we are going to be transferring. It's going to be taken from one department and put into another. So that is actually going to, we're not taking any more from the corporate city budget. So we are basically at a wash with what Invest Medicine Hat would have had for a budget in comparison to ours.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful because, just to hear it, it sounds like new staff, more people at City Hall. We're growing City Hall, and it's a gamble, but it's one we have to take. I'm not saying it isn't. So I guess I'm looking for the spice. Like, what's the thing that this model has that perhaps might trump the previous model as far as what will make us successful for investors to pull their wallet out and actually invest in our community? What do you think this model does that perhaps the other one may have lacked?
Well, I think this model, the reason that we're able to have an increase of staff compared to what the old model was because we have put more resources into on the ground staff, whereas the old model there was more resources put into senior level management. So I think that that's going to make a big difference. And because if we have more resources for those staff on the ground, we have more people that are sharing the message of Medicine Hat, that are connecting with the right people. And so I honestly think that is going to make a big difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, and through the chair, I have a few questions for you. I noticed that we talk a lot about the regional strategy. How does that align with our current ICF and our current PEP partnerships?
So the regional strategy, the intent around the regional strategy was to bring, there was municipalities that had been a part of a partnership years back, and I think that there had been some challenges around the municipalities collaborating, and so that was, and I'll be actually speaking to this in the next presentation, but that was Cypress County, County of 40 Mile, the towns of Bow Island and Redcliffe, and the village of Foremost. And so the intent of the regional strategy is really about getting those municipalities back to the table to start working together. I am fully aware that Palliser Economic Partnership is doing a regional strategy as well, and I have been working with the executive director of that organization to make sure that our strategies align. So when that consultant is hired for us to do our regional economic development strategy, that will be part of the deliverables, is making sure that we're aligning with other groups in the region.
And that will include the intermunicipal as well?
Yes, I mean, I haven't actually said that in the RFP. I will go back and look at that. I don't know if, because the municipalities that are in the intermunicipality committee, I said intermunicipal committee, because they are also involved in the regional strategy, I think that's almost an organic thing that's going to happen.
I hope so. I just want to make sure, because I sit on both of those, both PEP and IC and the intermunicipal. And one of the first things I heard from both of those organizations was that we have a tendency as City of Medicine Hat to flex our muscles and not work with people. So I'm really hoping that isn't going to be the case, because we obviously are the bigger partner, so we're gonna get the people, we're gonna get the shopping, we're gonna get the houses, more than likely. So I'm just want to make sure that this regional approach is truly regional, and we're not just telling them it's regional and get on board.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say that we are definitely we are very, very cognizant of that fact, and we are taking that, that message to the municipalities. We have established a regional steering committee. So there's one person that has been appointed to the regional steering committee from each municipality, and we are really representing, like I'm representing myself as 1/5 or 1/6 of that. Of that partnership, and making sure that that everybody has a say. So I am very cognizant of that.
Thank you, I really appreciate that. And then my last question, I noticed land is not on this work chart any longer.
Yes.
Okay, can you walk me, because it used to be on the last
Yes.
investment is not.
Yes.
So where is land going?
Do you want to speak to it, or you want me to? You,
Through the chair, if you remember when we did the restructuring, land got moved to Managing Director Pancoast.
Thank you, I forgot.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Thank you, through the chair. Director McLean-Moore, welcome, and thank you for your presentation. I listened intently, and some of the things I observed were that over the years and the different iterations of economic development, I've sat through a few of them, and interestingly enough, some of the, I'll call them fundamentals, or the 4 pillars that you delivered are I guess, foundational to a robust economic development system or plan. The people is certainly important, I think, to Councillor McGrogan's point. I hope and certainly ask that the only thing that people hear is not that we're adding or there is a request for more jobs and more money. Your analysis about investment to gain investment is critical. Having the right people in the right places and not being spread too thin and being able to work collaboratively is critical. We have a lot of excitement. There's a lot of pressure there always has been, and there's certainly pressure today to deliver. And one of the things I'll simplistically, I guess, add to the conversation that I've heard over the years is when people are talking about economic development is new, good paying jobs. That's what I hear over and over and over. That can mean a lot of different things to everyone, but in the end, it is about seeing investment come in the community and, as you indicated, building on what's already here. So one of the things that I guess I'm pleased to see is that we're not reinventing everything just for the sake of creating different kind of conversation. The fundamentals need to be there for things to work. The right people, the relationships, as you indicated, are critical. Like it or not, last IMH, in my opinion, one of the things that their approach, and I'm very quickly going to add and steal from that, was that their approach was a little bit innovative in the sense that they went after things where I felt before it was more, we have the systems in place, we'll wait for them to come, and then when they do, we'll latch on. But I think to your Tim Hortons analogy, if there are 3 communities, where are they going to go? But the one who maybe approaches them and says, you know what, we're the right community for you, might be the one that lands it. So I was interested in, you made a comment at one point in your speech around perceived lack of business support and streamlining the investment system. So can you just speak to that? And I only ask that because the word perceived caught my attention. Is that, and perception, as they always say, can mean the reality, but it's not necessarily the reality. So how do you propose the new economic development system will break down those barriers of what is perceived or real lack of systems that can support business development?
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's why I did add perceived in there because, I mean, everybody is going to have a different perception. Again, I think that with more boots on the ground, we are going to be able, we just organically are going to be able to offer more business support. I think, again, I'm going to go back to partnerships. Right? We cannot do this alone. I said in my presentation that the Economic Development Department is not an island. We need to be able to work with our municipal partners and regional partners to be able to get things done. And I think that that is going to be key to getting more bang for our buck. Right? As far as investment attraction goes, I know you had commented on the proactive approach of the previous model, and I agree. I think that, there was some really good work done as far as approaching, as far as deciding where it is that we want to focus our efforts, and let's go to them. And that's why I have dedicated a sole position to investment attraction. I've dedicated a sole position to business retention and expansion because I think if we can get specialists in those areas, we're more likely to have better results.
Thank you.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through the chair. Welcome, Director McLean-Moore. It's nice to see you, and thank you for the presentation. It's been a long time since we've had someone talk about economic development up at the podium, so it's really good to see this. I just had questions about, I think more comment questions. We're pretty fortunate in Medicine Hat. We have wonderful business owners and developers within our community. We're only, 63,000 people, and we've got some awesome businesses and developers within our city. And what are your thoughts on working alongside with those type of individuals or groups for future projects and things like that?
Yeah, well, we already have, I've been working closely with Kim Turton with Land. She's our real estate expert. And I'm working with Land and Planning to be able to find ways, synergies that economic development, the three departments can work together. And so I do see that there's willingness around the tables to be working together. And so I think it's really going to be about identifying those processes that we can put in place to make sure that we are all aware of what's happening and that we can all put our expertise into the conversation to be able to support our business community.
Great, thanks, Lena.
Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, and through the chair, Director McLean-Moore, I have a couple of comments about your plan, and one question which is not for you, it's for City Manager Mitchell, I believe. First of all, when I was reading through, I thought you've been having a lot of work that you've been doing in the last 10 weeks. That's what occurred to me. So your operational plan is ambitious, but what I like that it's really carefully and thoughtfully tied back to our strategic plan and objectives that we had. And it feels like a long time ago we talked about them, just to see them pulled up and tied to an actual why was great. I really appreciated that so much. I also appreciated the really honest assessment of our challenges. You were very diplomatic in how you articulated them, but you were really honest about it, and I enjoyed reading that. Well, their challenges, but I enjoyed that you recognized their challenges and something. And then, of course, you also recognized our strengths, which it's always good to cheerlead for the team from time to time. When I was campaigning, one of the things I was most interested in my discussions with the chamber was business retention and expansion. So I'm really glad that that's one of your pillars and it's so important. There's so many great businesses in Medicine Hat that have carved out their own successful niche, and to be able to expand and build on that is a really good thing for economic development to do. And I also love what you said about relationships, and we've heard that a lot, mostly complaints about relationships with the city, but I think staffing has been a major reason for a lot of those complaints. So I have no questions for you, just nothing but compliments, and I really appreciate, I have a lot of hope now, which I did maybe not have, before you presented today. But my question for City Manager Mitchell is I don't think that the budgets are quite a wash, because where did the land, when the two units were separated, where did the budget for the land go? So I understand that economic development and the economic development part of Invest Medicine Hat is a wash, but there's still the land portion that Invest Medicine Hat did. So if I could understand a little better, I would appreciate it.
Through the chair, before I throw it over to Rochelle, Managing Director Pancoast, I just will say that, not saying that this happened, but sometimes using land and land sales, sometimes to offset, can be misconceiving or detrimental. So just take that as a cautionary note, and I will ask Managing Director Pancoast to answer the rest of the question. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair, and Director McLean-Moore could correct me, but my understanding when she mentioned it's a wash is looking back to the earliest version of IMH, 2.0, as I believe some people have referred it to, essentially looking at that number, Director McLean-Moore's new department plus the land team that we've taken on collectively would be a wash against the prior budget.
So the 1.79 million includes the managing director position, the director position, and the two economic development officers. So the land was actually split from that 1.79 million, but the managing director was part of the economic development department.
I'm going to wedge in on you, Councillor McGrogan. So it's 279,000 additional or still a wash?
So 279,000 would be the amended budget for 2024.
So there is a somewhat of an increase.
There is an increase because the department was taken down to, like I had said, bare bones. We've only got three positions right now within the department. So in order to staff up for the 2024 year, we need to be able to add 3.5 more positions, according to my recommendation.
Thank you. And whoever can answer this, what is the current variance for the economic development budget, excluding the land? Because we had, I think, budgeted for a number of positions that I don't think were filled. So is there a fairly good positive variance?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So we approved a budget for what was then Invest Medicine Hat and included a number of positions that haven't been filled for a number of months or whatever. So I guess my question is, what is the variance between that budget, the projected budget, and the actual right now?
I'm not actually sure. I'd have to come back with you on that. So basically, what has been unspent in the 2023 budget?
Yes, that's exactly the question.
Yeah, and I do have those numbers on my computer that's not working, so. Yeah.
But presumably we'll be ahead.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Thank you. The other question I have is it's on 144 of the agenda. It's about the contracted services, and those are being reduced by about 70,000 in your proposal. And it says that that's a reduced commitment to PEP and other miscellaneous budgeted expenses, but it also names a number of important memberships that we have. Can you expand on what the reduction is, like the 70,000 reduction?
Yeah, so Palliser Economic Partnership, we used to pay, I believe it was $1.30 per capita to that organization, and we reduced that through an agreement. We are now we are only paying $20,000. So that was the majority of that. There were a few miscellaneous things that had been accounted for in the Invest Medicine Hat budget that we no longer needed. But the majority was the Palliser Economic Partnership.
So the other partnerships in there were still completely dedicated to, and
Everything that I listed in that briefing note, we are still committed to. Yeah.
thank you. I just wanted to get clarity around, so there is a number of projects that you mentioned. One is rural renewal, and then there's workforce development, and then I think the other position is, what is it called? Immigration-related workforce development, something like that.
Are you talking about different positions under workforce development?
Yes, so it's rural renewal and also separately workforce. So as you know, we have applied for the rural renewal stream. I think you said that's like one of the positions almost entirely.
Yeah.
And so how do the two things relate, workforce development and the rural renewal stream?
Yeah, I actually had to wrap my head around this too when I started, because I kept thinking, well, workforce development can just be rural renewal, but it's not, because rural renewal is actually a program that we have to implement, and we have administrative duties that basically have to be done on a daily basis in order to be a rural renewal community. So I have one position dedicated solely to rural renewal, and then I have another one dedicated to workforce development.
And so just to clarify, the rural renewal one was something that we had, whether expressly or implicitly, we had agreed to take on that work when we applied for the rural renewal stream.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, just a follow-up question. It was a comment that you made to Councillor Robbins that tweaked my curiosity about land being split and now 3 departments that we're going to be dealing with them. I guess my question is, and I hear in the community from different developers and investors that sometimes it's tough to navigate through City Hall. Mm-hmm. And now that we're kind of split up into 3 groups, as you called it, do you have a specific plan around what, like a navigation specialist type work, or how are we going to help people get, hey, I want to spend some money to spending the money? Yeah. How can we do that?
Yeah. And that's actually one of the ideas I have. As you know, we've got strategies to build. In order to define the exact work we're going to do. But one of the things that I think would be really helpful is to be able to have that concierge type of service coming from our department, where we can send those business owners or resident or our community to the appropriate place within City Hall. I know that Managing Director Bohan is also, they're going to have a planning concierge, right? So I see our concierge working very closely with the planning concierge to make sure that we're, hand-holding our businesses in, any types of questions that they have.
Yeah, no, thank you. I just, it's that yes, we can, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair, to Director McLean Moore. So there's unfortunately a lot of pain points in this particular department, and I believe the human-to-human connection and relationships priority that you hold and value is essential to move forward. And I think that as a leader, I view you as someone that's perceptive and willing to listen, and I think that's something that is going to be it's going to make or break the success in this particular department. So I'm very, very grateful to see you in this position right here in front of us. So thank you for your willingness to step up and take on such a big role. I appreciate the comments that you've made about bridging between different departments and not working in such an isolated fashion. I think that's something that is going to, I hope there's a ripple effect, and the people that are so brilliantly talented, as you refer to, see that and are able to take that and run, because there's something so empowering about working in a team, especially when there's, like you said, really intelligent and capable people that work here. So I have two questions. So this one is, you've kind of alluded to this or even directly answered it, but I will ask it again anyways, because there's probably others that you can talk about. But who do you see the key community organizations that you will collaborate with to ensure successful relationships are built in Medicine Hat? I know we've talked about regional partnerships, but there are community organizations in Medicine Hat that do workforce development, that do training, including Medicine Hat College, including Community Futures. How will you bridge, how will you meet the needs of the community alongside those particular organizations?
Well, I think, yeah, so I mean, we're going to be working, you had mentioned a couple already, Medicine Hat College, Community Futures, Chamber, Medicine Hat Chamber, even our regional economic development organizations like Palliser, Verge, Apex, which is our innovation organization. And I hope I'm not forgetting anybody of those core people, but core organizations. But I think that, like I've alluded to, just that our relationships are, and that's how we get things, that's how we're going to get more done based on the limited resources that we have. And and that might even expand, as I get, deeper into the community and my relationships grow, that might even expand into working with the land department or the planning department, and, liaising with the build. I can't remember the name of it. I know the acronym, but I can't remember the name of the actual organization, or the construction association. All of these organizations are going to be critical for us to be able to get done what we've got to get done. So.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up? So I guess it's not a follow-up, it's just another question. So through the chair, I believe marketing and communication, the brand and visual image of Medicine Hat is an essential tool. And for me, it's something that I kind of, like I've mentioned before, kind of nerd out over, because I think it is so important and it's such an interesting thing to me. I think it was something that IMH did quite well. And I wonder, what sort of innovation do you imagine for your department in this category?
Well, we're going to be working very closely with I can't remember the new department name of communications. Sorry. With communications. We're working very closely with communications to probably mimic a lot of what was done previously, because you're right, Invest Medicine Hat did an amazing job of first of all, just their brand identity, but also the way that they told the story of the businesses in the community. So we're going to take, there was success, right? There was a lot of success in the previous iterations of our economic development departments. And so we're going to take what was successful and we're going to move those projects forward for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, can I get a motion?
I move that council approves option 1 as presented as the preferred 2024 Medicine Hat economic development structure, with an operating budget increase of $279,000, which includes an additional 3.5 employees for a total department staff of 6.5 and results in total operational budget of $1.814 million.
I'll second.
Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, we'll vote on the motion. That's passed unanimously. It is 8:30 and we do have 5 additional items to go through, so hopefully we can make good time. We have another presentation on the agenda from Director McLean Moore, and that is titled Medicine Hat Economic Development 2023 Major Operating Expenses Request. Go ahead.
Okay, so this presentation will request council approval for major operating expenses to support a Southeast Alberta Regional Economic Development Strategy and the Regional Rural Renewal Designation. So early in 2023, council provided direction to administration to pursue project funding for a Southeast Alberta Regional Economic Development Strategy. Although no formal motions were made by council for the strategy, there was both implied and indirect direction from council to pursue funding for the project. So about the Regional Economic Development Strategy. We know that economic challenges and opportunities span multiple jurisdictions, and solid collaboration is necessary for success. The regional strategy aims to support the relationship between the city and surrounding municipalities. As I had mentioned before, those municipalities are Cypress County, County of 40 Mile, towns of Bow Island and Redcliffe, Village of Foremost, and then ourselves. The 5-year strategy funded through Northern and Regional Economic Development Program will include 3 pieces: a strategy, an implementation framework, and an action plan. It will provide a forum for partners to raise issues, insights, share insights, guide decision-making, and prioritize advocacy projects. So I just wanted to share quickly, I know we're starting to run into time. So the implementation framework part of this project is what excites me the most. As I had talked earlier, that there has been some challenges working together as a region over the last little while. And so we've created a strategy which, you know, we all have heard the saying, you know, we create a strategy and it sits on the shelf. Well, part of the project has actually included an implementation framework. So our strategy is going to be done by the second quarter of 2024, but we've actually got a consultant staying on with us until the first quarter of 2025 to guide the group through working together. So we're gonna really look at what are those tools, what are those processes to make sure that we are all singing from the same song sheet, and that each municipality is supporting this regional plan based on the capacity that they have. So I'll now provide some background information on the second initiative, the Regional Rural Renewal Designation. On September 8th, 2022, Council directed administration to apply for the Rural Renewal Stream designation of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program to support the attraction and retention of newcomers through a community-driven approach. Following the guidance from Council, in February of 2023, the City, along with regional partners, was awarded the Rural Renewal Designation. As part of the designation, the City commits to working with local employers to do 2 things: attract and recruit skilled workers, and collaborate with settlement agencies to build a welcoming environment that will help with immigration retention. So what are the 2 rural renewal projects? Project number 1 is the Community Preparedness and Implementation Project. This project will increase employer and community capacity to support newcomer retention with a more welcoming, inclusive community. Project number 2, the immigration-focused labor market profiles will present the economics of immigration and provide updated labor market data to inform evidence-based decision-making. This research will be a tool to share with employers and the broader community why immigration is important to our economy. Based on Council's direction to apply for these 3 projects, it is recommended that Council approve 3 new 2023 Economic Development Major Operating Expenses projects totaling $939,000, funded by third-party grants of $565,000 and the City of Medicine Hat operating reserves of $374,000. So here's a breakdown. of the city's contribution to these projects. In essence, the City of Medicine Hat would provide a total of $374,000 matched with Government of Alberta funding at $565,000 for leveraging a total of $939,000. So I'll now take questions.
Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you. No questions, but just a couple of comments. First of all, I love to see a budget amendment that includes grants and money coming from other levels of government. I also really appreciate the commitment to working with these immigration and integration organizations. I know both of them quite well, and they're very invested in seeing this work go forward in our community. So again, that piece around collaboration and working with organizations in the community that are already doing this kind of work, I really appreciate that commitment to it. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. I just have a question regarding the Rural Renewal Program has a recertification or a reapplication date. I think of, is it 2 years or 3 years?
I'd have to get back to you on that one.
That's just fine. I am just curious about, once the program is implemented, will our costs be reignited? Will there be further expenses every time we have to reapply? Or will we establish kind of the fundamentals of being able to run the program, and then when we have to reapply, it's more of a recertification, not a bunch of expenses again at that point in time?
Yeah, I am not sure about that. I'm not sure if I could answer that, you know, through city manager this week, if you'd like to know. Yeah.
Councillor McGrogan.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments on this. For Joe Citizen, we're going to spend this money. What are we getting in return? Like, just in, you know, we're going up the elevator and someone says, what are we getting for that money? What tangible thing will the citizens of Medicine Hat see from this? What would you say to them?
So I'll address the regional strategy first. I think that it's really, really important for economic development staff, economic development programs to be looking outside of their municipality. We have a lot of, you know, let's take a challenge we're dealing with right now with housing. So if we were to have an investment inquiry where they wanted to, they were going to invest in Medicine Hat and they wanted to bring in 100 jobs, that would be, it would not be able to happen very easily with just Medicine Hat, because we don't have the houses and we don't have the workers. If we can collaborate with our regional partners, we are more likely to be able to answer those investment inquiries saying, yes, we can. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest reasons to collaborate. Even things like, you know, if we look at our agriculture sector, if we want to attract some sort of, you know, value-added ag facility, I need to be able to work with my regional partners to be able to understand what are the inputs that are available around the region that make Medicine Hat a good place to be able to invest. So I think that by us working together, we really are just, you know, adding to the resources. You know, it's a regional resource rather than a municipality resource. We're looking at, I think our trade area would be around 80,000 population rather than 60, and so it just makes us stronger. Puts us, we're more likely to be on the map when it comes to investment attraction. So that would be the first one for the regional economic development strategy. As far as the rural renewal goes, we are really just seeing a crunch when it comes to workforce. So we have companies in Medicine Hat that want to expand and they can't, because they can't find the qualified labor to be able to do so. So the regional renewal program supports them in being able to bring in staff so that they can actually expand their operations. So the labor crunch is limiting us in expanding and attracting investment. Does that help? Yeah.
The $200,000 for the NERD program, the Regional Economic Development Program, didn't we commit that money already? Okay, so what budget did it come out of before?
I'm not sure. The city, like the council hasn't committed it. Would you like to speak to that? Yeah.
Through the chair, I'm going to turn it over to Managing Director Pancoast, who was in charge at the time. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. Essentially, at the time, these were short-term grant opportunities that we were chasing consistent with our council strategic priorities and also with the ask related to rural renewal designation. We knew that we had committed to coming to council with a budget amendment partway through the year once we stabilized our intent with the economic development program. We also knew that we would have surplus operating dollars should we need to access that in order to carry out the program. However, this really is finalizing the homework to make sure that, and really no dollars have been spent as of yet. We haven't committed specific dollars other than through grant agreements. So this is a bit of housekeeping cleanup to catch up with the typical way that we budget by putting these larger projects into something called major operating expense so that we're not relying on the ongoing operating funds now that this will be a reset budget.
So basically, it was earmarked for the variance. Okay, thank you. Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Just complementary or supplementary to Councillor McGrogan's comments about what are we getting for this, well, what is the value from this particular request. I am just curious if the rural renewal stream targets skilled workforce or if it's just general immigration and allowing the average person who's an immigrant to get a job. Because my understanding is it allows skilled workers to relocate to our area and work in positions that they're qualified for. Can you allude to that?
Sure. So the rural renewal designation, we can make it what fits best for our municipality. So right now, what I can tell you is that position that I told you is going to be starting with us on October 3rd. Brady Schnell is going to be joining our team, and he's going to be the one that's leading the rural renewal strategy. He comes with tons of experience. He's coming from the town of Claresholm, where they implemented a program very similar about 5 years ago, and he's the one that started it. So we are very, very fortunate to have Brady join us. We will be doing the research. We will be deciding, based on that research, how we decide to make those targets. I suspect that we are not going to open up to every business being able to apply through the rural renewal. I think we're going to be targeted, and what that target looks like it remains to be seen. We'll know more in the next few months.
Can I just add a supplementary comment? Thank you, I appreciate that. And the reason why I bring it up is because it was I had many emails from immigrants living in our community hoping to stay, and they could only stay as a result of that. And they were doing all sorts of really, really important positions for different companies. And so I'm excited to see how that targeted strategy allows our community to take advantage in a positive way of those people who deserve to keep their jobs. So I'm looking forward to it. Good.
Councillor Sharps.
Yes, thank you. I just actually want to provide some clarity. Majority of the positions on the rural renewal streams are actually for refugees. And then there's a few components that aren't. So the people that are here on skilled positions, they really should be following the ANIP or the Federal Express Entry or the Canadian Express Entry. Those are very quick. They're under 6 to 8 months. Where we're struggling with using the designation, and you and I had talked about it, I have a couple of physicians that can't get their spouses over. This would be a primary indication of what you could use it for, because we're not keeping our foreign doctors without their spouses here, right? So the majority of them are for refugees and for unskilled, low-skilled, and to expedite, because that's where a majority of our labor shortage is. Because if you're hiring skilled workers, it's not that hard to do a labor market impact assessment and get the workers over here. And it's very quick. Alberta's very quick. The Alberta Immigrant Nomination Program is slow, but most people don't go through that. So just to give you some background on that.
All right, seeing no further questions or speakers, can I get a motion?
I move that council approves 3 new 2023 economic development major operating expenses totaling $939,175 as presented, funded by third-party grants of $565,000 and City of Medicine Hat operating reserves of $374,175.
I'll second.
Any debate or discussion? Seeing no speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That passes unanimously, and with that, I thank you, Director McLean-Moore, for your time. You put in a significant amount tonight. Much appreciated. Thank you. Moving on to item 11.3, sale of Monarch Theater. The sponsor is Energy, Land, and Environment. Yeah, okay. And there's a recommendation there.
Sorry, would you like the motion at this point? Okay. I move that council approves the sale of the Monarch Theater to the purchaser with the following key terms and conditions. A purchase price of $100,000. B, the property is sold as is, where is. And C, a real estate purchase contract in a form and content satisfactory to the city manager and city solicitor.
I'll second.
Questions or comments? Councillor Hirsch.
So thanks. Through the chair, I don't sit on this committee, so just read with interest like many other adders in regards to the proposed sale. I did have a couple people reach out to me and kind of felt, because the purchase price was listed, and felt it was a little bit light, quite frankly, and I had indicated that there's a little bit of understanding in regards to it, so maybe I can ask that. There is some limitations that we certainly, as a council, put on it, and I know, again, when you start putting limitations on property and ability to exercise whatever they want, and if you start limiting that, that obviously has a limitation. So just wondering for some of the people and myself, how we arrived on purchase price.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you through the chair. Managing Director Pancoast, can you outline that for us? Thank you.
Thank you through the chair, and if it's helpful, I can offer a bit broader context as well. Really this, you may recall, council had provided earlier direction after an expression of interest process had failed through public services. The team introduced a request for proposal process on criteria that council had outlined, and the submissions were scored on that basis, including intended use, city financial obligations, organizational capacity and experience, and historic heritage preservation as a mandatory requirement. And out of the submissions that were received, it was the highest scored submission that was identified, and we've been working through the land team to help paper the transaction since and arrive at the primary terms that you're looking at today. I'll also note that in addition to those terms, we are looking to include a 50-year right of first refusal in case there is any identified shift in the intended purchaser ever wanting to sell or lease any part of the asset, making sure that the city has an opportunity to protect its interests in that important area, as well as certainly making sure that there is a protection for the municipal heritage resource. I will also note that there's been some questions about why we've been experiencing some delays. In this case, the proponent had submitted a joint proposal, and ultimately, at being identified as the preferred party to move forward with, they needed to go through a process to actually create the legal entity that is purchasing this property subject to council's approval. And with your indulgence, I do have permission from the purchaser to share who they are and a little bit more about them. So this is the Monarch 1911 Society. And this society is a nonprofit directed by members of the Rotary Clubs of Medicine Hat, and it's operating as a social enterprise. The society does plan that once the Monarch is fully operational, the profits are to be annually distributed back into the community. And ultimately, the partnership that I had mentioned is really that Monarch 1911 Society intends to enter into an agreement with Plugged In Media to operate and program the theater going forward. And I believe they are in the audience if they have stayed here and are offering a wave. And we also do have available, if detailed questions come forward, we have our real estate specialist, Kim Turton, available, as well as manager Erin Nelson to assist, because certainly public services was a key driver leading to this point.
So I appreciate that, because a lot, so the sale was disclosed, but necessarily the developer and what the plan is. So I'm quite pleased that that was shared, because I think it just kind of illustrates a little bit, and my feedback actually was that as well in regards to making sure it was the right fit for the community, because really at the end of the day, you've got a very specialized building that has some longevity to it, something that we want to protect, which is quite a limiting factor. So I think that said, and that was in my earlier comment, so I'm comfortable in terms of how we arrived, but I think it's nice. So I appreciate the background, because that really wasn't, although the purchase price was illustrated, the kind of the rationale and how we got there isn't. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm so glad that Councillor Hirsch brought that up, because I too had a question about the time, but I still kind of have a question about the time that it took. So we started this, I think, in January of 2022, and I understand the requirements they needed to run through. Is that something we can change and be more specific on our actual RFP to be very clear about what we're looking for, so that we're not stuck in a 18-month holding pattern?
Managing Director Pancoast.
Thank you. Through the chair, essentially the RFP process was relatively quick. We were able to identify the preferred purchaser early on. It was really that process of going through Alberta registries to make sure that the legal entity could exist. That area had a significant backlog, and that took roughly 4+ months to finalize that process.
Just to follow up, so if I understand, they can't it can't be a component that somebody's already pre-registered with the Alberta registries as a corporation or as a registered charity or whatever it is. Is that correct?
Managing Director Pancoast.
Yes, through the chair, we could have made that as a requirement. I suspect that would have been a limiting factor in the number of bids we would have received and would have prevented opportunities like this one from coming forward.
Perfect, and I just have one last question. I am so glad that this group got it. I think they're amazing, and I see what they do in the community. However, when we're looking at this and you're looking at for $100,000, the first thing, I would be sitting at home saying, well, why the heck wasn't it listed, and why didn't we get a realtor to do it? Isn't that the smart thing to do? And I think Councillor Hirsch touched on it, but what was our rationale with going the route that we did versus going through for sale sign?
I will also note that was a council decision, but Managing Director Pancoast.
Yes, thank you through the chair. And the prior decision item that had come through council was included, just to remind everyone's memory, but just as a quick summary, it really was the multi-factored considerations that council was looking for. We even at one point had considered whether we should be leasing the building rather than selling the building, simply because of the desire to control the ongoing activities. In this case, the desire by council was to pursue a sale, and whether that was outsourced through a real estate group or conducted internally. Certainly, our real estate specialist has significant history as a real estate agent within the city, and she was a key resource in leading the papering of this exercise. But really, again, I don't believe it was the delays related to the actual papering, and more so the registry's office.
Thank you. Just one last thing. I just wanted to ask that for purposes of, I know it was a council direction, but like so many things that we talk about in council, the people watching don't always remember what was said, and so let's just cut that off at the nose and see if we can get that sorted.
Councillor Hyder.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. I'm excited, and I'm also excited to be educated about this 1911 Society of nonprofit. It's part of the Rotarian group then? Is that, I guess I don't even know who to ask. Managing Director Pancoast?
Managing Director Pancoast, if you have the information.
Through the chair, I can confirm that it's a nonprofit directed by members of Rotary Club. So the specific relationship to Rotary itself, I would defer to the individuals that are present.
They're shaking yes. Just to follow up, and then it'll be operated by Plug-in Media?
I believe that agreement is pending, but that is the intent.
Yeah. Just again, this will be wonderful. Like it's such a part of our downtown core, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. So that's exciting.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, like others who have indicated, there's excitement, and certainly to hear that our Monarch, our beloved Monarch, is going to come back to life is absolutely good news. The conversation around the purchase price versus sale price, again, I would speculate, but I know that some of the conversations that have ensued since we acquired the building, not unlike other buildings, there are future maintenance costs that have been identified. I mean, obviously you're well aware, but and there was ongoing maintenance and costs associated with keeping this facility mothballed, if you will. So the fact that we're able to get a return even of that nature, and more importantly, identify a partnership, or not a partnership, but a group who are willing to partner under very specific detailed requirements under the RFP, maintaining obviously the historical designation, which is huge. And just on that, one of the things that certainly we hear over time is our historical reflection on what has been lost, or where councils of the past hadn't acted, and I'm going to say that, to preserve some of our historical entities. So I think at the time we did what we needed to do, and it was the right decision. And today we have another decision before us that I think is the right decision. So I'm pleased to see this here, and I'm also pleased that we will have first right of refusal in the if there were any turning of events of any sort. But we certainly are excited to hear that the Monarch 1911 Society is taking over. So congratulations, I hope, once council votes.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I just want to speak for many people in the community and say how excited people are that something is happening with the Monarch. I get questions about it often. What's happening? What's happening? So to be able to vote, I will be voting in favor of this, and I'm really excited to see the energy come back alive in this space. And thank you to the group that stepped up, and I'm behind you and excited for you. So yeah, thank you.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. That passes unanimously. Congratulations to all. The next item is under committee business. Item 12.1 is the Housing Accelerator Fund application, report, and resolution. The sponsor is the Development and Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you. I'll just read the little thing and then we can talk about it after. So whereas the Government of Canada, through the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, provides grant funding intended to drive transformational change and create the conditions for more housing supply over the short and longer term through the Housing Accelerator Fund. And whereas the City of Medicine Hat has applied for the Housing Accelerator Fund and has proposed 9 initiatives intended to grow housing supply and expedite housing approvals as part of this application, therefore be it resolved that the City of Medicine Hat Council supports the application for the Housing Accelerator Fund and the 9 proposed initiatives put forward by administration as part of this application.
I'll second.
Thank you. Councillor Van Dyke, I got the sense that you would like to speak to the motion.
Yes, thank you. I just want to commend the staff that worked on this. There was a really short turnaround time on this. The funding was announced, and they had a very limited time over the summer when a lot of people were away. And I know that staff worked tremendously hard to meet the conditions of this in a timely fashion and get it in. So I want to commend them for that work, and also for what they chose as being the priority areas that they had to submit for this. And just a little clarity around this, that this is a resolution and that this is not a budget amendment or anything of that nature at this point.
Which begs the question, it looks like when you scroll down to the actual items, it looks like most of them are allotted $0 for staff time. Is that a long-term, that's just what we project right now, or what would the budget amendment look like?
So I think at this point, this is a resolution just saying that we support the action that has been made, the application that was submitted, and then depending on approval, and there's a calculation that would, as part of this, that would tell us how much we would get if we receive it. And then I think plans would come out of that. So anything coming out of that would come later, but I think it would actually be covered by the grant.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps?
Yes, through the chair. I actually just had one quick question, and that is, what have we done to ensure that we won't be denied, like the City of Calgary was just denied with having not gone after certain classes? I think it was I wrote it down, the HGO and one other one. Anyways, they just got refused. And the minister's letter back to them was very clear, like, make sure these are in there or you aren't going to get. So did we do that, or are we going to expect a refusal back? And just a quick question.
Managing Director Bohan?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Calgary's application, the letter received by Calgary was a cautionary note to advise them that prior to approval, that they would be required to ensure certain aspects of the Housing Accelerator Fund were met. Calgary went through a very recent, in fact, just this past weekend, a public session to get their housing strategy completed. We had our housing strategy completed in 2020. Our crew, our staff has been working with the administrator for this program, Canada Mortgage and Housing Commission, throughout the application process to ensure that we've met the requirements. So we're very confident that we're set to go with once it's approved.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a technical question. So we've already done the work, correct? So this is just a matter of having a resolution and open? Thank you.
Councillor Robbins?
Thank you, and through the chair, I just wanted to say that I was, this, unfortunately, for the application, is at the end of a long agenda package. And so as I was, after spending all the time talking to my child about roads and sewage and explaining that to her, I was sort of losing a bit of steam, I must say. And so I just started scanning this to say, what do I really need to understand? It's just for information, whatever. And then certain sentences started to pop out, and I thought, this is actually really interesting and innovative and could really change Medicine Hat in such a positive ways. So each of the initiatives I found really fascinating to read about. I was like really happy to learn more about them. So to whoever prepared the application, it's great. It's something to really look forward to. And I think, to me, it doesn't eliminate the sort of traditional way that development happens in any way, but it's just so many creative ideas to improve Medicine Hat. And so I really enjoyed reading it. So I did slow down, I'd get out my highlighter and went through, and there's so many great nuggets in there for anyone who's interested. And it's at the very end of the agenda, but it's worth sticking around to the bitter end. Thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Just very quickly, Worship, I like some of the comments made. I mean, at the committee level, I know talking to staff, one of the observations certainly that was made was by myself was that we often hear these kinds of accelerators being discussed or promoted through the bigger municipalities, but here we are in Medicine Hat working to get our fair share, and we're hopeful for that. There's no guarantees, but we're hopeful. To that point was I asked about the timing of our application, and were we, and wasn't trying to be presumptive, but were we at the early part, middle part, or end part? And I understand we were well at the beginning part of this application process, and then the establishment of those categories being ones that fit our mold, as someone said here, but also have the highest and greatest opportunity for acceptance, and therefore garnering higher yields of dollars that we can leverage. So I'm excited for this, as you said, Councillor Robbins, and we're hopeful.
I have a question. So it says that the key information, a lot of the key information was derived from the Medicine Hat Community Housing Society's the housing strategy they prepared. I'm just wondering, in the consultation or community engagement section, it specifically says we've been in contact with Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, but what about groups like Medicine Hat Community Housing? I'm sure this was on their radar as well. And for example, development community, things like that. I think it says that they will be consulted. Did any consultation go into preparing the list?
If Your Worship, thank you for the question. I can beg your indulgence, I've got two of the architects behind the application here prepared to speak to some of those details. If you'd permit them to come to the microphone.
So permitted. Welcome again, Managing Director Sissons and Director Brenda.
Yes, so some of the background on this, we did have a short timeline on this project. So with the application requirements, so housing strategy is required. So a lot of the elements were pulled from that, but it's also, okay, what are some creative ways that your community can drive these initiatives to create new housing? So every community is going to have a different set of initiatives. There were certain ones that we didn't qualify for that we found out. So for example, a lot of the bigger cities, they have high orders of transit. So like a C train is an example. We don't have that here, so we couldn't use that as a tool. So the ones we came up with, we looked at what can we accomplish in a short time. So from the date that if we're approved, because it is a competitive grant process, from the date that we're approved, we have 3 years to execute all of this, and you can't start counting your units until you've completed your initiatives. So it wouldn't make sense to let's say having a very in-depth initiative that would take you to 3 years, because then you wouldn't be able to count any units and you wouldn't be able to get your grant funds from that. So that was kind of our thought process. A lot of the conversations we've had with the development industry over the last few years, so some of the struggles that they face in infill development, that kind of just soaked in, and we kind of looked at that and how do we apply our initiatives to then get the funding and then apply that funding to help that process get completed. So that's kind of essentially where we got a lot of our ideas from, going back to working with some of the groups like the nonprofit housing providers. That is number 9 on our initiative, is to kind of circle back. We do have to do an update as part of the grant if we do get selected, to do an update within 2 years to the housing strategy report. So working with them on updating that, getting new numbers, and working with some of our nonprofit providers to accomplish some of their goals. So that there is going to be a lot of dialogue going forward, but it was first and foremost get these initiatives in the grant process, because it was a very short time frame, just using what we knew from previous discussions.
Thank you. City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to really say, we talk a lot about innovation. I've been beating that drum with the staff. I want to say kudos to Managing Director Bohan and his staff. They saw an opportunity and they got on it, and I think this is really exciting. So thank you for that.
Seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion. And that is unanimous. Good news. The next item is 12.2. You guys are not here for that one as well? Nope, okay. Bylaw 4736 to amend the public roads bylaw, and the sponsor is Development and Infrastructure.
Your worship, I'd move that council gives first reading of bylaw 4736, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend the public roads bylaw.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's first reading, so we will just vote on first reading. And that is passed.
At this time, I'd move that council give second reading to bylaw 4736.
I will second that.
Any discussion? Councillor Van Dyke?
Yes, sorry, thank you. In consultation with community stakeholder Bike Medicine Hat, and also reach out from community members, I wanted to make an amendment to the motion, and it's regarding the, very specifically, children riding on sidewalks. So as it stands in the current amendment that's on the table, it is changing the bicycle wheel diameter to 50.8 centimeters, 20 inches, and I would like to amend that to be based on a child's age versus a wheel diameter, much like how the Calgary bylaw exists now. I think that the likelihood of police pulling over a child on a bike based on their appearance is equivalent to them pulling someone over based on their guesstimate of what the wheel size is. And I think that basing it on a child's age is much more in recognition of the fact that we're not looking at the size of a child. We're thinking about things like their cognitive ability, their reaction times, their fine and gross motor skills. And people, tend to ride where they feel safest. And so for a child, the sidewalk is the safest. So the Calgary bylaw specifically says under the age of 14. So my proposed amendment, if I may, would be to keep Section 58 the same up until the little kind of paragraph underneath B, and I would like it to say, yes, exactly that. Thank you. A child's bicycle operated by an individual under the age of 14 years, and any person accompanying a child are exempt from this provision. And that second portion comes from our existing bylaw.
Thank you. Can I ask a clarifying question first before we get a seconder? So why isn't that last paragraph about child's bicycle not included in the no person shall ride a bicycle on a sidewalk except?
I'm not sure why. I just copied it
Okay.
to match the existing formatting
Fair
that
point.
it was in the bylaw.
Because if we're exempting a child's bicycle from the section where it is already accepting people from riding on the prohibition on riding on a sidewalk, is that a double negative, is my question.
So are you suggesting that it should be C underneath there? I have no issue with that. I would just ask maybe the solicitor has an understanding of why it's currently written that way.
I'm sure he does. Honestly, I'm reading it kind of on the fly, so I was just wondering if I was missing something. Okay, City Solicitor Bullock.
Through the chair, just looking at the wording, and it's difficult to amend a bylaw on the fly, I'll just say that. I think, the bottom portion is just meant to be an exception to the rule. That's the intent of it. So.
Exception to the rule stated in
That you
section
can't.
58?
Regarding riding a bicycle on a sidewalk, yes.
So if it would clarify, I'm happy to move that little sentence up into a letter C under 58, if that makes more sense for everyone.
So C could say a child under the age of 14 operating a bicycle, and any person accompanying that child?
I just used the wording from
I
the
know,
Calgary
I'm sorry.
bylaw because I didn't want to cause issue with changing the meaning of what it was. And given that that would have gone through their process as well, I felt more confident doing that.
I'm sorry, City Solicitor Bullock. Okay, do we have a seconder for the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Dumanowski.
Well, Your Worship, I'm supportive of the amendment. I'm just trying to understand for clarity, and I'll just say it out loud. So when I read for a child under the age of 14, it suggests to me they're 13 and under. Is that correct? So I'm wondering if we want to be more specific. To me, saying 14, I see that number, it's a visual, but it's suggestive of 13 and under. So it's either 14 and under or 13 and under, but using the words 14, under the age of 14 to me is confusing.
So that is what City of Calgary used, and it would mean 13 and less than 13.
Yes, like I said, their sentence they used was a child's bicycle operated by an individual under the age of 14. If we want to say inclusive of 14 or up to and including 14, or I'm not sure what people would prefer. If we want also, if it would be preferable to send this back to committee to workshop it a little bit more, I would be happy to have that happen as well.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table.
So can I withdraw my motion? Or am I not allowed to do that once it's been seconded?
It does say in our procedure bylaw. City Clerk, do you have the answer off the top of your head?
I do actually. Thank you, Mayor Clark. So when a motion has been made and seconded, the chair should at that point restate the motion, and once it's restated, it becomes ownership of the assembly as a whole, not the individual who made the motion. It no longer belongs to them.
What if I haven't restated the motion?
Then it still belongs to the mover, and the
All right.
seconder, it does have the option of withdrawing their second if they so choose at that point.
Councillor Van Dyke, do you wish to withdraw your motion?
I'm happy to withdraw my second.
I will withdraw my motion. And can I make a separate motion to refer this back to committee for workshopping?
Specifically to clarify.
To clarify age versus bicycle diameter, bicycle wheel diameter.
Do we have a seconder on that?
I will second that.
Councillor Robbins?
I guess I'll say point of order. I believe that we had a motion, then you were amending it. So there's a motion to amend. So the motion to amend has been cleared off, but the original motion is still out there.
The original motion was for second reading of the bylaw.
Yes.
So
I don't recall who made it. You did?
I think at this time, though, we can still make a motion to send it back. So we won't vote on second reading now. We'll send it back to committee, and then when it comes back, we'll be at the second reading stage. I have a bunch of people on the speakers list. Is anyone still wanting to speak to this item? Councillor Knodel? City Manager Mitchell?
Thank you through the chair. I just wanted to suggest that when it goes back to committee that we make sure that we talk to City Solicitor Bullock and make sure that we're meeting those needs as well. Thank you.
All right, so we'll now vote on the motion to refer. I guess we have to do it again. That's unanimous. The final item is item 13, notices of motion. Councillor Sharps.
Yes, so thank you, through the chair. At the October 3rd council meeting, I intend to introduce a motion directing administration to conduct a review of Bylaw 3117, the unsightly property bylaw pertaining to vacant and derelict properties, and take appropriate and immediate measures to address this pressing issue, and to report back to council with options to enhance the effectiveness of the bylaw and identify any gaps or shortcomings that may hinder its enforcement.
Thank you. That's it. So seeing no, it's just a notice, so seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. It's 9:05 p.m.